The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 14th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. So one of my guilty pleasures for TV viewing is a show called Deadliest Catch. Have you heard of it? Maybe you've seen it. Has that cool Bon Jovi song at the beginning of it. Yeah. It's a show about crab fishermen on the Bering Sea off the coast of Alaska. And it'll make you rethink whether you order crab on a menu or not. I'm amazed by it because of the sheer grit that it takes for these people to go out on these boats and to just take a chance, drop these crab pots into the water and hope that these little creatures, which by the way look like spiders, big ones, they just hope that these crab are going to climb up into these pots and that they're going to catch them, right? Now, I suspect there's no such thing as a typical day on a crab boat. If there was, it would probably be 36 hours long based on everything that I've seen. One of the characters on the show is Captain Sig Hansen. He's an American-born guy from the Pacific Northwest, but he has 100% Norwegian blood flowing through his veins and even speaks Norwegian on occasion. And Sig and his brother Edgar, who is his younger but not the worst for wear friend and shipmate, have been blessed to have a pretty stable crew where a lot of the ships tend not to. Occasionally they bring in a new guy, though, and they bring in this new person. They put him through a hazing process. They call him a greenhorn. They bring him in to learn the ropes. Every once in a while, it's even a girl. The captain's daughter was one of the people that was on the show a couple of years ago. The old souls have a way of fishing that has allowed them to accept and embrace a kind of endurance that you and I might not have. They have an ability to recognize that the job is really, really, really hard, and yet they just keep on plugging away because they know the job's got to get done. The greenhorns, meanwhile, are seasick, exhausted, barely able to hold their head up, let alone keep up with the work. This, of course, leads to good-natured ribbing by the seasoned crew. And finally, after that 36-hour day or more, it's time for a meal and a few hours of sleep. Utterly exhausted, the greenhorn falls into his bunk, and the camera zooms right into his face as he says, "I don't know if I can do this. What if I fail? What if I let the captain down?" I can't help but wonder if being one of Jesus' disciples doesn't feel a little bit like being a greenhorn on the Bering Sea. The disciples have just come off a long haul with Jesus where they helped to feed 5,000 men plus women and children, so conservatively we'll call it 10,000 people. 12 of them feeding 10,000 people. They cleaned up afterwards, gathering the leftovers, and now Jesus sends them out on a boat as he goes on to pray. And our exhausted band of greenhorns gets on the boat, but they don't get any sleep. Because a storm is bashing their boat from side to side. I imagine that they are afraid for their lives. When have you been utterly exhausted? Can you think of a time? Some of your faces just went like this. Yeah. If you can think about that, maybe now you can think about the mindset of our disciples on the boat. Now comes Jesus in the early morning, and the disciples exclaim, "It is a ghost!" Or as a friend of mine who's a pastor in Flagstaff, Arizona, suggested to me earlier this week, the proper way to say it is a ghost! I kind of like that, but it isn't a ghost, is it? It's Jesus. Peter and the other disciples were looking for reassurance in the midst of the storm. Some theologians suggest that Peter's challenge is an echo of the devil tempting Jesus in the wilderness. Maybe you heard that too. If you are the Son of Man, if you are Jesus, command me to step out of this boat. Whether that was the intention of the writer of Matthew or not, we'll have to wait until that day when we answer all those questions and we're with God. Regardless, Peter does ask for proof, and Jesus invites Peter to be a part of the answer to his own question. That happens a lot, doesn't it? And Peter steps out onto the water. Our greatest fear is failure, I think. And really, if we're honest, our greatest fear is appearing like a failure to those around us. Was this going through Peter's mind as he was walking on the water and distracted by a rush of wind and the storm around him? I don't know. Was Peter asking the question, what if I fail, as he sank into the water? I don't know. Maybe. When is the last time you had to ask yourself that question? Notice I didn't say if you had to ask yourself that question, but I said when you asked yourself that question. Whether we do it verbally, consciously or not, I think as human beings we're wired with that little impulse in the back of our brains to ask the question. A friend who is a pastor and a teacher at Luther Seminary wrote this question in the context of taking his daughter for college visits, buried deep in the questions, very deep inside of the questions about practical things like housing and meals and books and schedules and activities, lies the embedded question, the biggest question for first-year college students. What if I fail? What if I don't make the mark? What will my family say about me? Gary Haugen, founder and CEO of International Justice Mission, said, "Fear is the great destroyer of dreams." Haugen is a lawyer who used to work for the United States Justice Department. By all accounts, very successful at his work and well respected. And through his work, Haugen became acutely aware of the issues of violence, human trafficking, and slavery in the world, and he had a vision to create an organization that would combat these terrible things about 20 years ago. And so he left everything behind and he started. Haugen has seen firsthand what fear can do. The crippling effects of fear on the dreams of people. His organization is intentionally recognized or internationally recognized for its work today. The U.S. State Department has given the International Justice Mission its highest honor. The International Justice Mission is credited with helping to crack down on human trafficking in Cambodia. Children 5 years old and younger being sold. International Justice Mission has challenged brutality by government officials in countries like Nigeria. And International Justice Mission has served thousands upon thousands of individuals in legal battles in issues of justice. And Haugen says that even though fear is a constant companion for he and his colleagues in their often dangerous work, he knows that God is with them. What has fear of failure kept you from accomplishing? How has fear of failure turned your focus away from loving others to worrying about how others might see you? Too often we forfeit our dreams out of fear. Too often we allow fear to be the undoing of our efforts to live our dreams. Too often we ask, what if I fail? At this weekend's men's breakfast and Bible study, we read from the book of Jonah. We only managed to get through one of the questions, but it was a good one. When have you run away from something you felt called to do? Whether we run away out of fear of failing or, as Jonah, perhaps out of the fear of being proven wrong, we, like Peter, lean into our fear and away from our trust in God. The good news for us is that God does not lean away from us. God does not lean away from us. Note that when Peter became frightened and began to sink into the water, we're told that Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. Last week I told you that whatever you bring to your life of discipleship in Jesus, God can use it. God can bless it, and God can send you out into the world with that thing. Today, hear me say that there will be hard times where fear will try to destroy your dreams, where the storms will beat against the sides of your boat, where a diagnosis will bring your world crumbling. There will be hard times. But Jesus does not lean away. Jesus does not step away or move away from you in any way. In the midst of your fear, Jesus stands with you. No matter the storm, Jesus says, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Amen.